Hey everyone, welcome to Tales in Text and I'm your host Nisha. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you the books that you need to read if you are interested in studying world religion, world culture and world mythology. I love to learn about different religions. I love to critically engage with different religions. So stick around. I have put the timestamps down below so you can jump to any section that you want to see first. And if you found value with this video, please do like this video, comment on what you're interested in reading first, and be sure to subscribe to my channel. All right, without any further ado, let's go right into Hinduism. The very first set of books that I want to talk about is the epics, because these are so pervasive. There are so many translations of these books, so many interpretations of these books, that we need to start with them right away. The first one that I want to talk about is Ramayana. In my older channel, South Asian Mystic, I had done a deep review of this series, and I can link that down below so you can go check that out. So the book, this entire series is the translation of the critical edition of the Ramayana, and it is translated by Dr. Bibek Debroy. This is part 1, which focuses on Rama's childhood all the way to his exile. This is part 2, where Sita is abducted and the search for Sita begins. Hanuman meets Rama and Lakshmana and crosses over to Lanka. And this final set is when Hanuman goes to Lanka, he causes damage to Lanka and he comes back and reports to Rama. Then the Yuddha takes place, Sita is rescued, and then once everything, they go back, after the fire, walking through the fire, the Agni Pariksha, then we go back to the kingdom, and then finally in the Uttarakanda, Rama abandons Sita, and it's Sita's life in the forest and also Rama's loneliness in the kingdom. And finally it ends with Rama finding out that he has sons, and he adopts these sons, and he divides the kingdoms, and ultimately this book ends with Rama's death. I really love Dr. Bibek Debroy's translations because they are very, very authentic. There are tons of notes in these books, and it remains very true to the Sanskrit original. So I definitely recommend this series of the Ramayana books. Next on our list is the Mahabharata, and again I've selected Dr. Bibek Debroy's translations. Now this series is massive, and if you followed my channel, you will know that I'm actually deep reading the Mahabharata, and I'm also making individual videos about different aspects that I'm reading about in the Mahabharata, the different dharmic dilemmas as I call them. And I'm discussing about how we can bring Mahabharata and the wisdom in the Mahabharata into modern times. So this is actually a 10-book series. This is part 1, which, as you can see, I have done a lot of reading and a lot of notes in, and you can find all the videos pertaining to book 1 already in my channel. This is book 2 that I've just started reading, and I've actually just completed just about this much. So yep, here we go. Page 39. I'm at the Khandava Daha Parva, which is basically where the Khandava forest is burnt and how the palace is constructed. And then this is book 3, and I will quickly show you the rest of the books, and then we can move on, because as you can see, these books are massive. Each of them is between 500 to 750 pages long, and there are 10 books like this, so we're definitely going to be taking a long time to finish reading this book. But if you want to read the Mahabharata with me, then you can definitely do that. So just subscribe to my channel, enable the notification button, and you will get notified every time I put up a Mahabharata related book. So I'm just going to show you the other books in the Mahabharata series right now. This is book 4, book 5, book 6. This looks really interesting. I wonder why they've chosen these as covers. Book 7, book 8. I am assuming this is where the war starts. Book 9. This is actually one of the least favorite covers of all time for me. I really do not like this cover. And finally, the book 10. I think I can guess what this is about, because, in the end, when Yudhishthira is about to go into heaven, a dog follows him to the gates of heaven, and the gods say that, you can't pass with the dog, and so he decides to forego heaven for the dog. I think that's what this is about. I'm excited to read this entire series, and you can join me, like I said, on this channel. The next in my list of Hindu books that you need to read is the Harivamsha, and often the Harivamsha is considered to be a part of the Mahabharata. But in this case, Dr. Bibek Debroy has actually split the Harivamsha separately, because as you can see, it's a pretty big book of its own accord. And this basically is the story of Hari. So Hari is in this case Krishna, so it's Krishna's story, but also we go into a lot of the mythologies of Vishnu as well, because as you know, Krishna is the incarnation of Vishnu. So this is a book that you need to read after you've completed the Mahabharata, because you'll get a lot more context once you finish reading the Mahabharata and then you read this. Next we have the Puranas, and again I've chosen Bibek Debroy's translations. You can find other translators of course, but I personally really love Dr. Debroy's translations because they're very accessible, they have a lot of notes, and like I mentioned, they stay as true as they can to the Sanskrit original. But if you have other translators that who you recommend, then definitely you can let me know in the comments below. And just can we just take a moment to appreciate just how gorgeous the cover has been done. This is basically during the churning of the ocean, and the Danavas, the Daityas, Danavas, all the Asuras, they are all on one side, and then the Devas, that is the gods, are on the one side. And I just love how the cover has been done. It is just so creative. I think this is my favorite cover of all time of any of these scripture books that I have. And again, each of these books are pretty big, and you have 1, 2, 3 in Bhagavata Purana. The next Purana that we have is the Markandeya Purana, which basically talks of the Devi, and this is all about the Devi stories. And the sage Markandeya narrates the goddess's story and why the goddess was created, what Shakti is, the goddess's various manifestations, and how she appears to the world, who she appears to, her mythology, and the symbolism of what she means and what she represents. And this is definitely a Purana that I really want to read, because this to me represents everything about women empowerment. And Hinduism, we are seeing, we have a lot of contentious issues such as sati, for example, or arranged marriages. And just reading about a powerful goddess, she is a woman, she is powerful, and often in Hinduism, Shakti is considered to be more powerful than any of the male counterparts. So I really want to read this book and see how we can use Hinduism and Hindu religion to further women's causes, and by extension also the causes of other genders as well. The next Puranas that I have is the Brahma Purana, volume 1 and volume 2. So the Puranas have basically 18 Puranas overall, which are considered to be the Mahapuranas or the major Puranas. And the Brahma Purana is the first of the set of the Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva Puranas. So this is the Brahma Purana, which talks of the origin myths and the creation myths. And again, we see, just as with the Bhagavata Purana, we see a kind of continuum over here. We see the night, and then we see it transforming into the day. We see the temple, the same temple, which is what it appears in the night time, what it looks like in the morning. And to me, this represents the cycle of life and the cycle of creation. I think that the cover pages have been done very smartly, and I am excited to read these two as well. The final Purana I want to talk about is the Vishnu Purana, and I'm calling this the final Purana because Bibek Debroy has only translated so far. He's currently working on other Puranas right now, and I always buy them. I pre-order any book that he releases because like I said, I love his work. And the moment the other Puranas come, I will create a secondary part to this video so you can take a look at the other Puranas in case you want to buy them. And this is the Vishnu Purana, and this basically talks of the Dashavatara of Vishnu. As you can see, all the Dashawataras are listed over here, which is really nice. So if you are familiar a little bit of, with the Vishnu iconography and Vishnu mythology, then you can kind of recognize all of them as they are. And this is just a one-parter. The next set of books that I want to talk about are the Vedas, and of course, as you can see, that there are two Vedas over here. Unfortunately, the in-depth books on the Vedas with commentaries and with the actual Sanskrit verses and then the translation in the English along with the explanation, those books, while they're available, they're insanely expensive. And so I decided to choose this small book. So I'll just talk about this one first. So this one is basically a compilation of, as you can see, the translation of the different Vedas. So you have all 4 Vedas over here, which are just translated, and you will have to use your own research to kind of learn about what they mean. And this is I'm just trying to find where the author information is so you can see it. Yeah, here you go. By Max Mueller and T.H. Griffith by Grapevine India. So this is the Veda. And the reason I chose the Atharva Veda, another copy, is mainly because a lot of times, in Hinduism, we see there's a debate of what a normal Hindu looks like and what when someone is branded as, say, for example, a witch or a Dayan or someone who is sinful. And I wanted to study whether Hinduism had any practices that are considered, at least in today's society, not as religion but as magic, as something that is distinct from mainstream religion. And when I researched, I found out that the Atharva Veda is actually Hinduism's book of spells. So everything that you see over here, so for example, all these things are actually spells in Hinduism. So we have all of these numbered ones, they're all spells. This is hymn to goddess earth, and this is about the blessing the goddess earth, a spell to bless the goddess earth. So for me, I found it really interesting that the Atharva Veda is actually a book of spells. You could consider it as a Hindu grimoire, as they call it, in Western circles. And this should really change our perspective of what magic is, and how magic is a part of religion. And religion isn't just about kind of boxing ourselves in conventions, but religion is a magical thing that allows us to engage with other forces in the world. And of course, because I mentioned the Vedas, I need to mention the Upanishads as well. So the difference between the Upanishads and the Vedas are that while the Vedas are direct scriptures, the Upanishads are commentaries on the Vedas written by sages over time. Well, I've chosen the S. Radhakrishnan translation of the Principal Upanishads. Again, this is a very important distinction, Principal Upanishads, because this does not include all of the Upanishads. So there are Principal Upanishads, that is the main Upanishads considered to be the authentic Upanishads that have been passed down from centuries. But there are much smaller Upanishads that came as close to, for example, Queen Victoria's reign. And you can actually see in those smaller Upanishads, which are more modern, you can see that there are notes on colonialism, on Queen Victoria, which doesn't really reach back into ancient eras. Huge, humongous book. Lots of reading to do. The next book that I want to talk about in Hinduism is the Arthashastra, which by Kautilya, which is basically a handbook for political stratagem and warfare. It talks of the responsibilities of a king towards different subjects. And these are not just human subjects, mind you. These are also animals, plants, other resources, how a king must treat different subjects, what kind of fines and punishments kings must impose, what kind of rewards kings must give, how money should be handled, how spies should be handled, how should a kingdom be protected, how should a kingdom be grown, what kind of war tactics are considered valid and what are considered sinful. So this book, as you can see, it is massive. And it's got lots of tables, and this is source material interpretation. So definitely for readers who want to really dive deep into Hinduism. Now the final book in Hinduism that I want to talk about is the Kama Sutra by Vatsyayana. And while some of you might say, hey, this is not a scripture, this is you shouldn't be representing Hinduism with Kama Sutra because that's what we're known for in the West. I think this is something that's really important to actually read, because let's face it, everyone does have sex. This is a normal part of life. It's a biological need, and so it's okay. And I think this book really talks of how creative Indians were. So definitely you should give this a read. This book in particular has a lot of wonderful illustrations, and a lot of the artwork over here are from Indian artists. Some of them are from foreign artists, but most of them are from Indian artists. Some of them are from different eras. There's different time periods. So you can not only appreciate Vatsyayana's write-up, but you can also appreciate the artistic tradition in India as well. Now, I don't think I'm allowed to give you a flip through of this, because then I'm pretty sure YouTube would ban me. So you can go check this out. It's available on Amazon. So yeah, go take a look. I believe that we must all, especially when we are living in this multicultural and multi-religious society, especially if you're from India like me, which is a multi-religious community, we need to be more aware of the faiths that our friends and our relatives follow. Most importantly, we need to critically engage with each religion, because in that way you don't buy into the hate that a fanatic would otherwise spread. And that's why I believe that we must read the source material of other religions so that we can understand where they are coming from, and we can understand and prove to the world, when everyone tries to tell us that another religion is bad and only our religion is good, that this is not the case. Every religion preaches peace and fraternity and love and kindness and empathy. I truly believe that in my heart, and that's why I'm also compiling a list for all of you who, like me, want to critically engage with, understand, and read about other religions apart from your own. In this case, since I am a practicing Hindu, for me other religions is anything other than Hinduism. And so I'm going to list a couple of books that I've taken myself, which I want to read and which I want to peruse and understand different religions from. So starting off, we have Christianity. And for Christianity, the first book that I've chosen is the NKJV Study Bible, which is the New King James Version. Now, the New King James Version received unanimous support online for being a book which was one of the best study Bibles for new Christians and for people who want to get introduced to Christianity and to understand what Christianity is all about. Now, this book not only stays true to the ancient teachings of the Bible. Again, please forgive me if I get any of this information wrong, because this is just something that I'm learning through, the blurbs on Amazon and on Google Books. So whatever is given there, I'm telling you based on that, since I haven't started studying them myself yet. If I say something that is not correct pertaining to any of these books, please feel free to comment down below and suggest other books as well, in case you think that there are other books better than these ones. But based on my research, the New King James Version Bible, Study Bible, got a tremendous amount of support in terms of being very accessible to both older readers and new readers, that is the younger readers who are coming new to the religion of Christianity. It not only talks of the ancient teachings of the Bible, but also brings these ancient teachings into the modern times to help practitioners, that is Christian practitioners, and people who want to understand Christianity, basically make sense of what Christian scripture is all about and how you can use the wisdom in the Christian scripture to live your day-to-day life. So this is one book that I've chosen. The second book that I've selected for Christianity is The Women of the Bible, a one-year devotional study of women in scripture. Now, the reason I chose this book in particular was because I'm always interested in seeing how religions approach religious teaching towards women. Because religion has been, at least institutionalized religion, has been for the most part very patriarchal. And I want to see how these religions, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, any other, Zoroastrianism, any religion, how do they approach their teachings towards women? Is there any difference between between what the scripture or what the religious knowledge holds for men versus women? And not only do we understand how current feminism and current female experiences have been shaped by religion, we can also see how we can use religion itself to further the female cause. And not just the female cause, because once we understand how religion impacts women, we can then take things forward by trying to use religion to fight for the rights of the LGBTQ plus community, fight for the rights of communities which are marginalized. For marginalized castes, for example. So we have a lot of scope for growth in that way, and I feel like reading Women of the Bible will give me a better understanding of how Christianity approaches the issue of women as seekers of religion. Next, we move on to Islam, and for Islam, I've selected the Study Quran by Syed Hussain Nasir. Again, just like with the NKJV Bible, the Study Quran got almost unanimous support online, especially on Amazon and on Goodreads and other review sites, that this is the best book to study Islam. If you are someone who is a Muslim and who wants to understand Islamic scripture better, or you're someone who's new to Islam and you want to understand exactly what Islam is about, so the Study Quran takes you through that. This book is supposed to be exceptional because of the quality of the commentary. It combines the commentary of not just a single individual, but it curates the commentaries of multiple people who are practicing Muslims and who have studied the faith, and not just through their lifestyle, but as academicians and people who are part of the clergy, and they've looked at Islamic teachings both from the ancient times and also bringing these ancient wisdoms into the modern era to see how we can use Islamic teachings to help humanity, to protect nature, to reduce communal violence. So all of these things are included in this. So I'm really looking forward to reading this as well. Next in Islam is the book on the Hadith. So the Hadith is basically a collection of stories and life experiences that have been shared, that were initially shared orally and then written down. And these experiences have to deal with the personal experiences and teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. And this particular book, based on my research, not only contains the stories of the Hadith and the teachings in the Hadith, but also literary discussions and theological discussions on the meanings and behind these stories, behind these experiences, and commentaries by experts about what wisdom we can get from the Hadith. The final book in Islam that I've selected is by Kesia Ali, Sexual Ethics and Islam, Feminist Reflections on the Quran, Hadith and Jurisprudence. So this book, unlike the Women in the Bible, the devotional study book in Christianity, that book was actually looking at the Bible as is and talking about how women should implement the teachings in the Bible. This book is a complete commentary on what is there in the Quran and the Hadith and Islamic law, and how we can find ways to empower women who are practicing Islam. How we can use the teachings given in these beautiful books of wisdom and religious knowledge, and how we can bring in this equality and empowerment for women. So this book is a through and through commentary, and it's not about how women can practice Islam. It's rather about using the Islamic teaching, Islamic scriptures that are available, and seeing how best to use this wisdom, how to bring it into the modern times so that women are given an equal state as men and are allowed to be empowered using these Islamic teachings as well. Trying to kind of find the feminism within Islam. And I think that's a really interesting take, and I'm looking forward to reading this book. Now let's move on to Buddhism. The book that I selected is The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. Now, many of you might actually be familiar with this book, especially if you enjoy reading books on religion, culture, and philosophy. Thich Nhat Hanh is known for being one of the most accessible writers on the subject of Buddhism, the most accessible and the friendliest personages in the Buddhist world. And I'm super looking forward to reading this book, because Thich Nhat Hanh also had this vision of a concept called engaged Buddhism. So engaged Buddhism is basically where you use Buddhist teachings and Buddhist scripture to actually effect positive change in the world. And engaged Buddhism is actually a concept that I studied about a lot in my course on religion and ecology, where I studied in one of the courses which was about South Asian and East Asian religions, where Buddhism and engaged Buddhism was a very large part of that course. And so engaged Buddhism is something that Thich Nhat Hanh actually spoke about a lot and practiced a lot, and he brought about so many wonderful changes, not just in Plum Village where he used to live, but also around the world. And I'm looking forward to reading this book. Another Buddhist book, or a book on Buddhism, that I want to purchase is A Handbook for Living, The Art of Happiness, written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in collaboration with Howard C. Cutler. And This book basically explores the philosophy of the Dalai Lama, specifically in terms of how to create and live a happy life. And it explores what exactly a happy life means. What is happiness? What does happiness mean to us? Can this happiness stay the same? And how to constantly remain happy. And there are times when we feel that there's something like toxic positivity and so on. But what the Dalai Lama talks of is how to maintain a holistic kind of happiness, where this internal happiness comes in through our satisfaction and gratefulness that we have for the world around us and the world that we've built ourselves and the world that we've been given. So it uses not just philosophy, but it goes into the psychological landscape of the mind, and I'm super looking forward to reading this as well. Now let's move on to Jainism, and I have a couple of books. The first one is an introduction by Jeffrey D. Long, and again, this book is not the source material of any of the scriptures in Jainism, but this basically is a commentary on the Jain ethos, the Jain ethics, the lifestyle followed by Jain monks and even Jain practitioners who aren't inducted into the order of monkhood. And I think this is going to be a good start to understanding what Jainism is all about, especially since Buddhism and Jainism both evolved, kind of split out of Hinduism. There you can see some traces of Hindu belief underlying these cultures, but then they evolved of their own accord and they've branched out in a beautiful way. And there are a lot of elements in Jainism, just as with Buddhism, that is completely distinct and diverse from Hinduism. And I'm really looking forward to understanding what Jainism is about and what are the commonalities with Hinduism, how does it differ, especially because in Karnataka where I live, there are a lot of Jain monks, there are a lot of Jain temples. So for me, as someone who's just seen these temples from the outside, to understand the culture behind them is something that I'm looking forward to right now. Another book that I have on Jainism is called Studies in Jainism, and this is actually by the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture that is located in Calcutta. And this is a very academic book in the sense that it's a collection of essays written by different members of the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture and compiled by the Ramakrishna Mission Institute. And it talks of varied philosophical aspects of Jainism on a more academic, a very nuanced way. This is a book that I'm not yet ready to actually study, because for that you do need to have some grasp of what Jainism is actually about. But if you are someone who is a practicing Jain and you already are familiar with Jain scripture, Jain ethics and Jain lifestyle, and you want to take your personal understanding and personal following of Jainism into a more advanced level, then I think this book is definitely going to be great for you. Next, we move on to Sikhism, and for Sikhism, I've chosen this book, Sikhism, A Guide for the Perplexed by Arvind Pal Singh Mandar. Now, please remember that this is not the Guru Granth Sahib, but this is just a commentary on Sikh scriptures, Sikh lifestyle, Sikh belief system, Sikh ethics, Sikh code of conduct, and a commentary on Sikhism as a whole, as opposed to being the source material. And since I'm not very familiar with Sikhism myself, that is, although I have friends who follow the Sikh religion, I'm not particularly familiar with the tenets of Sikhism. So I felt like this would be a good and accessible book to start reading about Sikhism. And then once I finish this book, I can actually try to find a copy of the Guru Granth Sahib and try to read through it and try to understand the tenets that they talk about in this book. So if you're someone who, like me, wants to just to get acquainted with Sikhism and to understand what the Sikh mindset and Sikh code of ethics is like, then I think this book will be perfect for you. Next, we come to Zoroastrianism, which is a culture followed by the Parsis who live in India. There is not just Parsis who live in India, but there are many Zoroastrian communities living around the world. And the Parsi community and their religion and their scriptures is something that is not very often talked about, that is not very often discussed, that is not very often shared, because that is a closed religious community. But I really wanted to understand this because we have seen, especially if you live in a city where there's a Tower of Silence, I'm sure you would have been curious to know why this Tower of Silence is there, what religious practices do Parsis follow, and the Parsis have been such generous members of the Indian community, helping develop India, contributing to so many areas of life, that it's important to understand where this generosity mindset comes from. Because often what I've noticed is when an entire community is in a particular way, like for example, Sikhs are known for their courage, right, and for their service to the nation, and Parsis are known for their generosity. It usually comes from a very philosophical, religious undertone, which is kind of built into the practices of that community. So for that, I wanted to find out what book that is it that Zoroastrians actually use for the scriptures, and I found out through my research it's called the Corde Avesta. Now, luckily, this was a free book that I got online through a download, and this book again is the source material, so you can actually take a look at the source material and read through it and try to understand Zoroastrianism and the Parsi culture. Next, we come to Shinto, which is basically a religion that is followed in Japan. It is one of the many religions followed in Japan, and this is actually the ancient religion of the island of Japan. And Helen Hardacre is considered to be one of the finest academicians whose understanding of Shinto is unparalleled. And this book is something that has received tremendous compliments and success for outlining and commenting about Shinto. So again, this is not the source material, but this is a commentary on Shinto practices, Shinto ethics, Shinto way of life, and the Shinto culture, the Shinto development, how the religion actually developed, and how the religion also kind of declined a little bit, especially when Buddhism came from South Asia to East Asia, and how Shinto and Buddhism are coexisting, and how do they interact with each other to create a religious mindset and cultural impact on Japan. Now we go on to Taoism, also known as Daoism, which is practiced in Taiwan and China. And this book is something that I actually found out through Instagram, when I was on Instagram at one point in time. And it's called the Tao of Pu. Now, basically what this book does is simplify and distill the tenets of Taoism into a very kid-friendly material. It's kind of like, you want to describe what Taoism is to a child, and so you use Winnie the Pooh characters or some cartoons to bring Taoism to life and to explain it to, let's say, a 5-year-old. And actually, I think this is such a beautiful concept, because a lot of these religions are very hard to pick up, especially if you read from the source material. And having commentaries like this, which simplify so that anyone can read them, is a great starting point. Another book for Taoism that I have is the Tao Te Ching, which is the actual source material for Taoism. And this book actually has a very massive introduction where a lot of commentaries are given about the Tao Te Ching, and then we actually read the Tao Te Ching and the scriptures in Taoism. The translation has been kept as authentic as possible, so that you can actually get a sense of how the Tao Te Ching was actually written and spoken when it originated. And I think it's beautiful because I have some, limited, but some experience with reading the Tao Te Ching's sayings and scriptures as quotes, because those are quotes that are very famous on social media, and they're just really beautiful. They sound so simple, but they're so profound and in-depth in meaning, and I'm really looking forward to reading this book. Now, when we look at religion, we have to also consider that religion is not just the institutionalized religions that we've been speaking about so far. Religion can also be the old practices that are very indigenous to certain communities, indigenous to certain nations, which aren't institutionalized but are still practiced or were practiced until moments in history, whether we like to admit it or not. Certain religious communities converted others, and colonization especially resulted in the loss of so many indigenous cultures. But when you're studying religion and when you're studying world culture, we need to look at these practices as well. And Orisha's Goddesses and Voodoo Queens by Lilith Dorsey is one book that I would highly recommend, because it's about African indigenous practices and African, indigenous religions, and we get to see what orishas are, what are the different African goddesses, and why voodoo, which in mainstream communities it's considered, mainstream cinema especially, voodoo is considered to be something evil, right? But voodoo is actually a very healing, it also has a healing aspect to it. It has a multifaceted nature which you need to kind of learn about before we jump to judgment about, by assuming that it is evil just because it's not mainstream. And I think this book really does a lot to bring Africa's indigenous cultures and traditions to the modern times. So I would definitely urge you to pick up this book if you're interested in learning about the feminine religious belief systems and lifestyles and practices from ancient Africa. Speaking of indigenous customs and cultures, we cannot forget the customs and cultures of the indigenous communities of Turtle Island, which is what modern day North America was called by the indigenous communities in ancient times. Braiding Sweetgrass is a book that I have had my eye on for some time, and it collects various indigenous wisdoms and talks of how these indigenous practices, this indigenous wisdom actually has a lot of scientific basis, how we can learn a lot from the plants around us, especially if you live in North America today. Then learning about the land whose land was occupied by colonizers, and whose land, whose resources you are partaking of, and how these resources, how these plants actually help you and support you. This indigenous wisdom is very important to know, because this is indigenous culture, this is indigenous religion of the people of Turtle Island. And this book is something, if you are especially living in North America or you're planning to move there, definitely you need to read this book. Apart from Braiding Sweetgrass, if there is a book that I recommend, it is the Handbook of Native American Mythology, which again talks of the distinct gods, goddesses, and other pantheon members within the Native American mythology and culture. These handbooks basically are kind of like dictionaries or encyclopedias, where you have entries that explain about different mythological characters, mythological deities. Then there are religions which they don't have active practice anymore, but if you want to learn about them, then definitely you need to go into the mythology of these communities. And one such is Celtic mythology, Tales of Gods, Goddesses and Heroes by Philip Freeman. So this is all about Celtic mythology. Then there's the Handbook of Inca Mythology by Paul Steele, and again this talks of the various gods, goddesses, monsters, heroes, heroines within the Incan mythology. If you're interested in Polynesian culture, then the Handbook of Polynesian Mythology by Robert D. Craig is a book that I would highly recommend. Again, similarly to the other handbooks I mentioned, it contains a list and short descriptions of the various mythological characters in Polynesian mythology. And then we come to Norse mythology, which is by Neil Gaiman. This book is quite popular. You might have actually already read this book or heard of this book. And again, this talks of Norse mythology and the characters that populate Norse mythology. When we're talking about the handbook series actually has books for different cultures as well: Chinese mythology, Korean mythology, Vietnamese mythology, Pacific Islander mythology, what have you. So you can look it up online. Sometimes they are available as free resources that you can just download. Sometimes you need to purchase them. So you can just find it book by book based on what you want to read, and you can just search for those. And then finally, we have the Llewellyn Sabbath Essentials. So this Sabbath Essentials, this Llewellyn series is actually following the books from the religion of Wicca. So Wicca is a neo-pagan religion that focuses on nature worship, and a lot of it is derived from Celtic and Norse and European pagan rituals. So if you are interested in learning about Wicca, there is another book by an author called Scott Cunningham. You can check that out. But otherwise, if you want to learn about the Sabbats themselves, so these Sabbats are basically the different seasons. So you have summer, spring, autumn, winter. So each of these books celebrates and talks of the folklore of each of these seasons. So we have Midsummer or Litha. We have the spring equinox, also called as Ostara. We have Samhain, which is celebrated around the world as Halloween. We have the winter solstice, which is celebrated as Yule. We have Lammas, also known as Lugnashad. Then we have May Day, which is celebrated as Beltane. And then we have Imbolc, which is Bridget's Day. So I went ahead and purchased The Essential Wicca by Scott Cunningham because I just realized when I was making this video that I want to actually show you this book, because now that I've shown you the books on the Sabbaths that I already have, why don't I have Scott Cunningham's book? So I went ahead and got it. So here it is. It's not such a big book, but it's pretty good. So this book is a very traditional approach to Wicca. Scott Cunningham is one of the most famous names in the Wiccan world, and you get to learn exactly what Wicca is, where it comes from, what the belief systems are about the god and the goddess, the different practices within Wicca. So it's based on my reading, which has been a cursory reading. A lot of Wiccan practices actually go into direct nature worship, interacting with the trees, interacting with animals, interacting with crystals, and just living a life that is attuned to the elements around you. So that's basically what I understood of Wicca, and it sounds very beautiful because as a Hinduism is also, a lot of the practices in Hinduism have to do with working with elements, that is, for example, Agni, Vayu, Bhumi, Varuna. And then a lot of the ingredients in our Hindu rituals are, botanicals. They are tree barks, they are leaves, they are flowers. We use honey, we use the sap of the trees. So a lot of the things that I found in Hinduism is actually very common in Wicca as well. And so I was really surprised to see just how similar both of these religions were, and I'm so excited to continue reading this book as well. So this is the book I was talking about before, Essential Wicca by Scott Cunningham. Another book that I got on Wicca is called Traditional Wicca Seeker's Guide by Thorn Mooney. Now this book is considered to be more advanced compared to Scott Cunningham's book, and I think definitely you should start reading Scott Cunningham's book and then read this, because Thorn Mooney goes more into a modern day practices of Wicca, whereas Scott Cunningham, because he's anyways from many decades ago, you'd find a older and more traditional approach to Wicca, whereas Thorn Mooney goes into what traditional Wicca actually is, but bringing traditional Wicca into the modern era. Finally, we have Wicca by Harmony Nice. So if you want an easy to understand book on Wicca, but that is rooted in modern times, rooted in the age of social media, written by someone who is pretty young, then you would love this book, Wicca by Harmony Nice, because while Scott Cunningham's book is more traditional and very formal in its approach to Wicca, Harmony Nice's book it tries to make it very inclusive by having a very youthful voice and a youthful approach. Alright then, this brings me to the end of this video. If you found value in this video, please do like this video, comment on what book you'd like to read, and just share your insights on the books that you already read or which are in your TBR. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you want to get more information about world culture, religion, philosophy, or you want to discuss spirituality related concepts. I love to use science with spirituality to find out how spirituality affects the real world experience and how the real world affects our spiritual beliefs. So be sure to follow me and subscribe to my channel, and we can engage on this video and on my other videos. There are plenty of playlists that you can take a look around. And if you want to buy this gorgeous notebook, it's 100% vegan leather. As you can see, it's my faith journal, and it's waterproof, 100 GSM paper, rounded edges, available in 4 different rulings, 12 different colors and different sizes. It's called Neora. The brand is called Atelier Neora, and I will link the 5% discount code down below. So all you need to do is just use that code when you're making a purchase, and you get 5% off on your purchases over here. And I just make a tiny earning through that without any additional cost to you. So through your purchases, you help me support this channel. All right, if you've been around this far, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video on Tales and Texts. Bye.